Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 16 articles for you, and all of the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. The first one I have is off of Liberty Writers. It says, Betrayal. Left Paris Accords, California just gave the inconceivable to China. So, the Trumps can't talk to anyone Russian, but it's okay for the governor of California to make deals with China? Well, apparently, as long as the liberals say it's okay, it's okay. Please note the sarcasm. The liberals that China is a communist country. Governor Jerry Brown just signed an agreement with communist China. Are they going to secede? Probably not. Or is this the first step? Governor Brown was so upset that President Trump withdrew from the bad climate deal that former President Barack Obama made in Paris that he signed his agreement with a communist country. Brown actually said, we need a very close partnership with China, with your businesses, with your universities. Now, I'm confused here. Suddenly it's okay for government officials to sign agreements with communist countries like China, but the Trumps allegedly have dealings with communist Russia. That's not okay. I guess it's because it's about Mother Earth and because it's part of the liberal agenda. By the way, Energy Secretary Rick Perry is also attending the Under 2 Clean Energy Forum in Beijing, where Governor Brown is. That's because while President Trump believes the Paris Agreement was a bad deal for our country, he is open to good agreements that help Mother Earth. The next article I have for you, headlines, and it says, Global warming fight has cost you more than $166 billion. The U.S. government spent nearly as much fighting climate change between 1993 and 2014 as was spent on the entire Apollo program between 1962 and 1973, according to a new report. A May 2017 report from Capital Research Center states that from fiscal year 1993 to fiscal year 2014, a total U.S. expenditure on climate change amount to more than $166. That total includes more than $26.1 billion from President Obama's 2009 stimulus bill, as well as regular annual budget amounts and federal tax credits distributed over a period of 21 years. In comparison, the U.S. spent dollars adjusted for inflation on the Apollo space program, which ran from 1962 until 1973, and flew 17 missions, including Apollo 11, which put a man on the moon for the first time. Through the program, the U.S. sent 7 men to the moon and back. The CRC report comes just as President Trump has announced that the U.S. is withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord. Under the agreement, the U.S. would have been obligated to pay $3 billion to a green fund by 2020, among other expected contributions. The annual expenditures on climate change have increased 490% since 1993, and the annual amount for combating climate change internationally has climbed by 440%. Most of the money is not going to climate science research, but to control CO2 emissions based on inadequately tested hypothesis dating to the 1970s. The amount of money spent on further research and experimentation in climate science is about 42.9, according to the report. It's a little more than 25% of its total expenditure on climate change, meaning that 75% of the U.S. climate change budget is dedicated to efforts to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and their presumed but not demonstrated effects. For such spending combating CO2 emissions is based on the 1979 Charney Report, published by the U.S. National Academy of Science, or NAS. The Charney Report theorized that if CO2 in the atmosphere were to double, the Earth's surface temperature would increase by roughly 6 degrees Fahrenheit, with a margin of error of plus or minus 3 degrees. However, the Charney report also predicted a more powerful warming trend caused by an increase in water vapor, Earth's dominant greenhouse gas. The CRC report states in 1979, scientists lacked any comprehensive measurements of atmospheric temperature, so the Charney report's guesses could not be confirmed or denied. But to cause this top-down warming, the warming trend in the atmosphere would have to be more pronounced than surface warming trends. That's because much of the energy from atmospheric warming is lost in space and does not affect surface temperature. Despite the fact that the Charney report's data was unconfirmed, it's heavily influenced the 1992 UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, or the UNFCCC, signed by President George H.W. Bush and ratified with stipulations by the Senate. With stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. The UNFCCC aimed to combat the rise of greenhouse gas, even though insufficient data had been gathered to confirm the Charney report's hypothesis that greenhouse gases were contributing to global warming. Meanwhile, aimed to combat the rise of greenhouse gas, even though insufficient data had been gathered to confirm the Charney report's hypothesis that greenhouse gases were contributing to global warming. Meanwhile, independent researchers have tested the Charney report's hypothesis against atmospheric temperature data, which now extends over 37 years, and found the hypothesis wanting, the CRC report states. New methods and equipment have been developed to test hypothesis, and the data does not confirm it. As the report declares, the hypothesis needs to be modified or discarded. However, the U.S. government continues to fund projects based on the faulty hypothesis. Although it seems clear that the bulk of the U.S. climate change funding should go into research so that the actual cause of climate change, as well as its potential impact, can be ascertained, $104.25 billion goes to projects other than scientific research, compared to only $42.49 billion sent to research projects. Annual expenditures in research have increased by 200% since 1993, while other climate change-related expenditures have gone up by an astounding 850%. Climate change policy has been $166 billion from 1993 to 2014. The next article, the headlines, it says illegal border crossings spiked 27% in May. Arrests along the U.S.-Mexico border spiked 26% from April to May, increase since Donald Trump became president, according to statistics released Friday. U.S. Border Patrol agents caught 13,535 people at the border last month, while authorities stopped another 132 ineligible people who tried to come into the country at an entry point. The combined total of 19,967 people was an increase over the 15,780 foreigners who tried to cross the southern border the previous month, according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection statistics. Experts generally estimated that for every foreigner prevented from making an illegal crossing, one gets through. That suggests that illegal immigration increased last month. Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies, said 1 month's worth of data is insufficient to draw sweeping conclusions. It shows the hazards of reaching on a, it shows the hazards of reacting on a monthly basis, she said. There are going to be ups and downs. We need to look for trends. Instead, it's worth noting that a steep and steady decrease in illegal border crossings immediately followed Inauguration Day. Apprehensions at the southern border dropped by 62.5% from January to April, despite little change on the ground. Although the Trump administration has implemented some policy changes, it has made little progress on building a border wall or hiring additional border agents. Experts have attributed the initial drop to people in Mexico and Central America as responses to the president's tough rhetoric. But Vaughn said that alone will not work forever. It underlines the need for actual enforcement, she said. Messaging is not enough by itself. Joseph Gazzardi, a spokesman for California for Population Stabilization, said the increase is likely a natural blip due to warmer weather and partially the result of the fact that few of Trump's policy proposals have taken effect. I would say to President Trump, you better do everything you can to make sure the internal enforcement remains, he said. Total apprehension remains well under the figure for May 2016, when authorities apprehended 55,000 border crossers. That was the second highest figure of any month in 2016. Illegal border crossings are still on pace to drop dramatically by the end of fiscal year from 408,870 recorded in fiscal year 2016. But Vaughn said the sustained progress will require more than talk. She said smugglers constantly change their methods to evade enforcement efforts. As long as people believe a job will be waiting for them here and they will get away with it, they are going to pay that money to the smugglers, she said. The next article is off of BizPac Review. It says, spare me. That's too dumb. Tucker takes on activists calling for taxpayer-funded safe spaces for Muslims. Tucker Carlson blasted a Muslim activist who said government persecution of Muslims is grounds for creating safe spaces for them funded by taxpayers. The Safe Spaces for Young Muslims was proposed by Australian group, the Islamic Council of Victoria, which represents 200,000 Muslims it claims are being persecuted due to fears over radical Islamic terror. Carlson questioned the ICV call for a place for young people to safely express inflammatory views that would cause trouble if voiced publicly during Friday's Tucker Carlson Tonight. American Muslim Blair Amani, executive director of Equality for HER, defended the need for protective spaces. I'm talking about safe spaces being somewhere who you are without fear of being surveilled, having violence committed against you, Amani told Fox News host, and I think it's a good idea to have everywhere. Carlson interrupted and clarified why Amani thought Muslims were the target of surveillance by the law enforcement agencies. Her response that it was due to counterterrorism efforts prompted Carlson to question why she thought these efforts were even needed against Muslims. Come on, Tucker, you're a smart guy. You know why that is, Amani countered. I'm a man who asks questions, and I'm asking a question about a statement you just made, he replied, adding that there are no counterterrorism efforts against other religious groups like the Amish and the Hasidic Jews because they are not committing acts of terror. It's not like some mass fantasy that law enforcement is acting out of, he said. This is a real thing, and I don't understand why groups like yours won't acknowledge the reality. It's there. It's true. Amani continued her narrative on the unfair targeting of Muslims, adding that violence is not exclusive to Muslim community, while noting the rise of white supremacists and alt-right violence. That's too dumb, Carlson said, pushing back on the call for Muslim-only safe spaces funded by tax dollars. Primarily, you're an American. Aren't we all, first and foremost, Americans, he asked. I'm black first, Amani replied. End of conversation, Carlson said. The next article is off of Liberty Headlines, and it says, clashes erupt nationwide as leftists crash march against Shara. Now, between members of purportedly anti-fascist leftist groups and conservatives gathered to protect genital mutilation, honor killings, and other practices associated with Sharia law as part of the nationwide march against Sharia, were forced to use pepper spray on leftists gathering after a group of protesters confronted the marchers. The Intermittent scuffles eventually forced officers to use bikes to push people back in an effort to keep the two groups separated. In North Carolina, police could be seen pushing a mob of leftists back as they moved closer to the marchers, the American Mirror reported. Tensions escalated in New York City when the anti-mask crowd crossed Foley Square to throw jugs of rotten milk at the marchers, according to the Daily News. Later, the two sides clashed violently in City Hall Park. Police departments across America are bracing for another wave of leftist-inspired violence as protesters gather in 28 cities in 19 states Saturday for the National March Against Sierra, the Associated Press reported. Counter-protesters in the city where marches are taking place have promised to disrupt them. Of local police who have been wary of groups like Antifa and others that identify with far-left politics. These groups have demonstrated a tendency to provoke violent clashes with otherwise peaceful conservative demonstrators like those seen on Sunday in Portland, Oregon. The MAS was organized by ACT for America, a conservative lobbying group that believes Sierra is incompatible with Western democracy and freedom it affords. Marchers will gather in both smaller communities and large cities like New York, Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta. The next article is off of BizPac Review. Fights break out as anti-Sierra rallies in 28 cities are met with resistance. Act for America organized March Against Sierra rallies in at least 28 cities across America on Saturday and was met with plenty of resistance. Left-wing counter-protesters turned out in force at these rallies, opposing the stand against Islamic law being applied in the U.S., and nowhere was it more contentious than in Seattle. Naturally, clashes between anti-Sierra rallygoers and counter-protesters video to include a clip where there was an exchange of punches from those in the crowd. 3 people were reportedly arrested after a large fight broke out, according to police in Seattle, according to the Seattle Police Department. Of course, when two sides stand off like opposing armies, the hostile comes out, or good golly, try that again. Of course, when the two sides stand off like opposing armies, the hostile outcome is not at all that surprising. The counter-protesters can be seen blowing into plastic noisemakers, bringing to mind the giggle-horn or yelling horn from Norse mythology. Liberals demonstrated the route at the, oh geez. I see it, my mouth's not saying it. Try it again. Liberals denounced the rallies as being anti-Muslim, but Act for America said that it is proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with peaceful Western Muslims, as well as peaceful Muslims worldwide, according to the Daily Mail. The emphasis was on Sharia law in the U.S. and noted on the group's website. Many aspects of Sharia law run contrary to basic human rights and are completely incompatible with our laws and our democratic values. And it says there are more videos and images from Twitter on the day's events, both in Seattle and around the country. So you can go there to view those items. It says, back to Seattle, turns out peaceful eye the beholder, as seen in the caption below, which is anti-Sierra pro-Muslim groups clash in mostly peaceful Seattle protests. And that was a tweet that was put out by Portland, Oregon. The next article I have for you is off of Newsmax. Sessions to testify to Intel panel Tuesday to refute Comey. Attorney General Jeff Sessions will testify Tuesday before the Senate Intelligence Committee to respond to former FBI Director James Comey's appearance before the panel this week. In light of reports regarding Mr. Comey's recent testimony before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, it is important that I have an opportunity to address these matters in the appropriate forum, he said in a letter to Senator Richard Shelby, the Alabama Republican who chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee. Sessions was scheduled to appear next week before Shelby's subcommittee to discuss the Justice Department's budget, but would instead send Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein in his place. He told Shelby that the Russian investigation would be the focus of the Intelligence Committee's questioning. Comey reportedly told committee members in a closed hearing later Thursday that Sessions might have had a third meeting that he did not disclose with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during last year's election. In March, Sessions recused himself from the Russian probe after acknowledging that he had met twice with Kislyak. He said information hearing in January that he had not met with the Russians during the campaign. The next article I have is off of Liberty Headlines. And while it's coming up, let me grab some more articles and get them in the queue. Click here. Okay, now let's get this one here off of Liberty Headlines. It says, House Committee to Comey, hand over the memos. Intelligence Committee Friday responded to fired FBI Director James Comey's testimony the previous day, demanding he hand over any memos of his conversations with President Trump. The committee announced that Representatives Mike Conaway, a Republican of Texas, and Adam Schiff wrote to Comey in the wake of the testimony requesting any notes or memoranda session memorializing discussions Comey had with President Trump. Hang on here. I get it to scroll. Request comes the committee's own investigation into alleged Russian interference in the 2016 election. After Comey made the startling admission that he shared his memos at Columbia University so that he could, with the media, special counsel for the Russian investigation. It raised the question of why he shared them and the media, but not with Congress. Of the memos included one partially leaked to the New York Times, saying that Trump had asked Comey to end the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. I hope you can let this go, Trump reportedly said to Comey, according to the memo. Were read to the Times. Representative Jason Chavez, Republican of Utah, wrote to the FBI in his capacity as head of the House Oversight Committee, requesting copies of any such memos. Also wrote to the White House counsel on Friday, requesting any recordings or memos of the conversations that President Trump may have. This request appears to be in response to a tweet Trump sent out that Comey that he should hope there are no tapes of their conversations. It's off of Conservative Tribune. It says Comey never had detailed memos on conversations with Obama. James Comey's written statement released to the public on Wednesday, and it contains several eyebrow-raising pieces of information. In addition to confirming that Comey did actually tell President Donald Trump 3 times that he personally wasn't under investigation, revealed that Comey never kept detailed memos with former President Barack Obama, the Daily Caller reported. For accuracy, I began to type it on a laptop in an FBI vehicle outside Trump Tower. The meeting, creating written records immediately after one-on-one conversations with Mr. Trump was my practice. Forward, Comey wrote in his statement, to have become a source of intense controversy after details were leaked to the media, causing Democrats screaming about Trump obstructing justice. For it to scroll a little bit here. This had not been my practice in the past, Comey wrote. Alone with President Obama twice. In neither of those circumstances did I memorialize the discussion, he wrote. Very interesting. Comey was apparently so biased against Trump from day one, or assumed he would eventually get fired, that he decided to leave a paper trail behind. It's caused many headaches for the administration. It is very suspicious that Comey would choose not to take the same kind of notes on his conversations with Obama. Director of the FBI, he really should have taken notes on his conversations with Obama to ensure accuracy in the event anyone asked any questions about his meetings. To do now. In this written testimony, Comey indicated that he didn't feel the need to memorialize his conversations with Obama, Trump, because there weren't as many of them. The whole reason? The American people deserve to know. The next article, this is off of Western Journalism. And I'm waiting for the hamster. Reflects questions about whether Trump-Comey tapes exist. Now, if we can get it to scroll up a little bit. Come on, hamster. For tapes of former FBI Director James Comey's conversation with President Donald Trump has been renewed in the wake of Comey's testimony Thursday before the Senate Intelligence Committee. However, White House Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders waved a request aside as a joke. First brought up the subject in a May 12th tweet. Tapes. Comey better hope that there are no tapes before he starts leaking to the press. However, he has refused to say more about Trump. Said in a May interview with Fox News, "I won't talk about that. All I want is for Comey to be honest, and I hope he will be." They indicated he does not know if tapes exist, but it never occurred to me until the president's tweet, Comey said, and I'm not being facetious, and I'll consent to the release. All I can do is hope. He knows if he taped me. Release all the tapes. I'm good with it. Lordy, I hope there are tapes. Armed with those comments, the issue of tapes moved on when Sanders met with the press on Thursday. Well, come on, hamster. Idea, she said when first asked about the tapes. Asked if she could find out. She joked, "Look under the couches." In the wake of the Watergate scandal, Congress passed Recordings and Materials Preservation Act in 1974. That law requires recordings of the kind made in the administration of former President Richard Nixon be preserved in federal archives. Installed a taping system. Those are federal records thanks to Nixon's court challenges, said Timothy Talley, the historian. That law and the way Nixon's tapes came back to haunt him have contributed to the fact that no president since Nixon has taped the White House conversations after Nixon were skittish to do, said presidential historian Douglas Brinkley. It's off of BizPac Review. Senator Collins shares theory on why Trump asked to meet privately with Comey. Senator Susan Collins thinks there is a simple explanation for why President Trump sought a one-on-one meeting with former FBI Director James Comey. While the Maine senator thought some of the president's actions involving Comey were wrong, she cut him some slack on his repeated attempts to meet with the fired FBI chief alone, citing the time in January pulled to discuss a dossier of salacious accusations against the new president. Perhaps that made the president think that whenever there is some conversation to be had with FBI director, that it should be one-on-one, because he had on-one meetings as well as um, other phone calls with the FBI director, Collins said on CNN's New Day on Friday. That doesn't make it right, but ironically, perhaps the FBI's actions in the first meeting sent a signal this is how their interaction should take place, she added. In testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee on Thursday, had privately asked him to drop the FBI investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, a claim the president has denied. This reflects the fact that this is the first president in our history who has neither military nor political background, does not fully understand or appreciate the boundaries, totally wrong, told host Chris Como. It is wrong for the President of the United States to tell or imply to an FBI director that an investigation should not go forward, she said. Senator and House Speaker Paul Ryan theories Collins on the Trump actions. So he probably wasn't steeped in the long-running protocols that establish the relationship between DOJ, FBI, and the White House, Ryan said Thursday. I'm not saying it's an acceptable excuse. It's just my observation, he responded to further questions from CNN. He's new at government, and so therefore I think that he goes. The next article I have is off of Newsmax. And the hamster's running. It says, Feinstein says Comey Lynch bombshell should prompt judiciary. Up here a little bit. I pretty much don't agree with Feinstein on anything, but on this one, yeah. Found something I agree with her on. Fired FBI Director James Comey. Whoops, it jumped. Hang on. Hamster's dancing in the wheel. FBI Director James Comey's Senate Intelligence Committee testimony this week, amid assertion former General Loretta Lynch was providing cover last summer, is enough to prompt a Senate Judiciary Committee investigation, Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California, said on Sunday. Easy feeling too, though, to be candid with you. Feinstein told CNN host Brianna Keilar on State of the Union, know more about that, know about it. That's to have a Judiciary Committee take a look at it. Pivoted back to a potential Senate Judiciary Committee investigation into whether Comey's testimony and President Donald Trump's combined actions build a case of obstruction of justice. Yes, but this is a separate investigation we're talking about, and I don't think we should mix the two, she told Keilar about Lynch-Comey question. The total integrity of the President of the United States. This is a very big deal, Brianna. It should be all hands on deck, and everybody should be welcome. Everybody should welcome a second committee getting involved, particularly on the technical legal aspects. Senator Feinstein, who serves on both the Judiciary Committee, said the obstruction of justice case might hinge on the words moments with President Trump after the room was cleared of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who employs the FBI director appointed by the office of the president, and in this case fired by the president. Can't just let it go, or the word, or try this again. Just let it go are the words that impressed upon my mind, Senator Feinstein told Keeler. And there are no witnesses. If there are tapes, please, equivocal on this, bring those tapes forward. Well, I disagree with her on part of it. I agree with her on part of it. The now can you just let it go? I don't believe that's what he said, and I don't believe that's what Comey testified to. That you can let this go in the wording. So I don't know. I mean, if there are tapes, which I don't think there are, but if there are tapes, that would tell the true story. He didn't ever ask him to let it go, is my understanding. But as far as Lynch and Comey are concerned, yeah, I think they need to be investigated to the nth. Article is off of BizPac Review. On very cowardly Comey and Sunday questions his leaks. President Donald Trump believes we have only scratched the surface of leaks from former FBI Director James Comey. In a tweet on Sunday, the president said that the leaks will be far more prevalent than anyone ever thought possible. The president asked, very cowardly. The tweet followed Comey's testimony before the Senate Intelligence Committee on Thursday, where he admitted to leaking his memos meeting with the president to the New York Times. The professor that Comey leaked the documents to, in order for them to be given to the media, is now in hiding. Find himself in legal trouble for the leaks, according to reports. The next article is off of Newsmax. And the hamster is running. Here we go. Graham to Trump. Your own worst enemy. As soon as the hamster scrolls it up here. President Donald Trump could be the first president in history to go down because he can't quit talking, Senator Lindsey Graham said Sunday. You may be the first president in history to go down because you can't stop inappropriately talking about an investigation that, if you were just quiet, would clear you, the South Carolina Republican said in toward Trump during a CBS Face the Nation interview. Said Graham, because he wants to help Trump as a president will do big things no other Republican could do. Trump, he continued, could deliver the United States from a broken immigration system, but the constant chaos is not helping. Graham said the probe should be in the Senate Judiciary Committee, to which he belongs, particularly because of suggestions that Attorney General Jeff Sessions and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch with the investigation. The senator also said he agrees that Trump's conversation with Comey but did not constitute obstruction of justice. At the same time, the press and its concentration on the Russian investigation are about as fair as a lynch mob. Trump is feeding the lynch mob with his tweets. Worst enemy, Graham said, again speaking directly toward Trump. Mr. President, knock it off. Every day you are talking about Jim Comey and not the American people and their needs and their desires, their hopes and their dreams. You're making a mistake. Graham also talked about pending health care legislation. It needs to bring the push to an end. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has said he wants to get something passed by July the 4th, But Graham said on Sunday that the House version of the American Health Care Act is dead in the Senate and only has 10%. My advice: can't replace Obamacare by ourselves, said Graham. Say this: 10% of these sick people drive 90% of the cost for all of us. Let's take those 10% of really sick people and put them in the federal managed care system. The next article, bigleaguepolitics.com, says video emerges of Seth Rich questioning ballot integrity. Purpose of murdered Democratic National Committee staffer Seth Rich questioning ballot integrity during the election data summit in 2015. Seth Rich with the DNC, he introduces himself after clearing his throat. I think some of you had spoken about a provisional ballot and rejected ballots. I guess we have looked at, as an outside practitioner with a vested interest in training our voters, how do we get better access to data that tells us why ballots are rejected, why ballots are cast as provisional, so we can analyze that and develop better training guidelines. Rich had valid concerns during the Democratic primary the following year. New York voters reported 2 voter purges that barred 120,000 people from being able to vote. The scandal, months before Rich's death, had led to massive outcry from supporters of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who believed that the DNC was engaging in an election fraud to nominate Hillary Clinton. Many have speculated that Rich was a supporter of Sanders, as he openly considered himself a progressive, including in that group as Kim.com, a tech mogul with close ties to WikiLeaks, who has asserted that the slain staffer was the source of the DNC leaked emails and that he knew him. As we have previously reported, .com has offered to provide Congress with written testimony and proof that Rich was the source, if they will include his murder in their Russian investigation. Additionally, the tech entrepreneur provided 3 email addresses that he claims belonged to Rich: c.rich@gmail.com, panda4progress@gmail.com, and pandas4bernie@gmail.com. The addresses pointed to social media and Reddit accounts that appeared to back up the claims that he may have been a disgruntled Sanders supporter. Rich was murdered early in the morning hours of July the 10th of 2016. The police initially ruled that it was a botched robbery, but his wallet, watch, and necklace were still on his person when he was discovered by police. 12 days after the murder, WikiLeaks began releasing documents that would reveal a plot within the Democratic Party to ensure that Clinton would be nominated over the widely popular Senator Sanders. Assange has previously hinted that Rich may be the leaker, while repeatedly reminding the public that they never comment on their sources. WikiLeaks has also offered a $20,000 reward for information on his killer. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often significant risk. There was a 27-year-old that works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered. He was walking down the street in Washington, Assange said during an interview with Dutch TV last year. WikiLeaks has retweeted articles asserting that Rich was their source without providing additional comment. The next article, final one for today, is off of Liberty Headlines. Didn't spend $1 billion on white working class. They spent it on themselves. Democrat Van Jones says Hillary's campaign wasted $1 billion. Commentator Van Jones ripped the Clinton campaign and the DNC during his speech at the People's Summit in Chicago on Saturday for wasting money and failing to reach out to working class and minority voters. The Hillary Clinton campaign did not spend their money on, and they did not spend it on people of color. They spent it on themselves, Jones told a packed house at McCormick Place in Chicago. They spent it on themselves. Let's be honest. Let's be honest, Jones continued. They took $1 billion, $1 billion, $1 billion, and set it on fire and called it a campaign. That wasn't a campaign. That was not a campaign. Jones continued attacking the Clinton campaign reliance on consultants and polling data that proved to be wrong. $1 billion for consultants, $1 billion for pollsters, $1 billion for data operation that was run by data dummies who couldn't figure out that maybe people in Michigan needed to be organized. He blamed the same forces in the Democratic Party behind the Clinton campaign's defeat for continuing to divide the resistance to President Trump after the election. That's all I have for you this morning. If you like what I'm doing here, please give it a thumbs up so everybody gets to hear the news. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.